Greetings, everyone. I'm sure that most of us teachers have had students who are sometimes difficult to understand because of their pronunciation. In other words, it causes a breakdown in communication. In this video, I'll describe the most effective approach to helping those students improve their pronunciation. And on top of that, even though we are customizing our session with the individual students, this approach requires minimal teacher preparation and time. And best of all, this approach is non-threatening to students. I myself, as well as many different ESL teachers, have used this approach and have found very positive results in not only students' improved pronunciation, but also their confidence in speaking. This approach is quite different from how pronunciation is worked on traditionally. In other words, we don't just bring in some passages that have special sounds to work on and have all the students practice those, often through drills. As I mentioned at the start, we customize the lesson. Often, when we hear the word customize, we think, oh no, that sounds like a lot of work. But in this approach, it's not. To demonstrate why this approach is so much more effective than traditional approaches, let's look at the pronunciation of two students, Cleo and Luke. Both of them were sometimes difficult to understand by me and their classmates. First, I had them record a short passage. I'll just read, here is with the passage, I had them read these two paragraphs, but I'll just read the first few sentences to give you an idea. Amy and Eric had a problem being happy. They thought that the purpose in life was to feel happy, and they thought that they knew what they needed to do in order to be happy. And then it continues for just a couple more sentences. By the way, there is nothing special about this passage. In other words, it's not connected to pronunciation. I didn't spend time looking for something that had special sounds. I just found something that I had used for reading with my students. But actually, I could have used one of their essays for this. Then I highlighted words that they mispronounced, which made it difficult for me to understand what they were saying. So on top is Cleo's words highlighted in yellow, and below is Luke's highlighted in green. And the ones that both of them struggled with are in blue. You'll notice a big difference between them. Now, traditionally, the teacher might tell the class, today we are going to work on the TH sound, because some of you pronounce these like Z's and think like sink. However, if you look at Cleo's and Luke's mistakes, neither of them had problems with the TH sound. So that traditional lesson would be a waste of time for them. Another teacher might look at these and say, oh, I see that both of them had mistakes with the word purpose and weren't. So let's do a lesson focusing on those. However, Cleo had problems with the LR sound, purpose, and went, and Luke had problems with the final consonants, purple or weren't. So let's look at an approach that will help students like Cleo and Luke improve their specific pronunciation needs. I'll use Luke for this demonstration, and you'll see that it only takes about 12 minutes for the complete session. I used a passage that I had shown earlier, which I had used for a reading activity. So step one, the student reads the passage silently for about 1 minute. So when he and I first met, I first gave Luke the passage and told him just silently read this passage for 1 minute. I told him not to worry about any vocabulary and said that I wasn't going to ask him any questions about the passage. Then in step two, which also takes about 1 minute, the student reads a part of the passage aloud for 30 to 45 seconds, and the teacher records and check marks mispronounced words on a different copy. So that's what we did. While Luke was reading aloud, on one of my copies of the passage, I just put little check marks above all the words that he mispronounced or that were just not clear. So in step 3, which took about 2 minutes, I analyzed the mistakes and chose about 8 to 10 words to focus on. So what stood out to me that was causing the most problems for Luke was the final consonants. So for example, he said, they thought the purpose in life was too few. Feel sounded like few. Also, thought sounded like thaw, and what sounded like wah. Those were the sounds that were really making it hard to understand him. So then what I did, I underlined those 8 to 10 words on his paper and marked stopping points and at the end of certain phrases. So this is how we customize it for the student. So then on his paper, the one that he had read from, I underlined 9 words and marked phrases as stopping points. So you can see the Amy and Eric had a problem being happy, and then pause point. They thought that the purpose in life, pause, was to feel happy, pause, and continued like that. So in the next step, he is going to read the passage again aloud, and I want him to stop at certain points so we can discuss his pronunciation. And you can see that we've spent only about 5 minutes so far on this whole process. So that's what we do in step 5. He's going to read aloud and stop at the mark points. And then if he has any mispronounced words, I'll help him correct them, and he can repeat, and then we can repeat this pattern. Now, this is when the fun begins. This is where this is when you get to apply your creativity and your teacher intuition to help your student. So there's several different ways that I've seen successfully work with students during this step. But here is how I did it with Luke. So Luke read the first paragraph. Amy and Eric had a problem being happy, and he stopped, he paused. And I nodded because he had no problems. So I nodded. So he continued to the next phrase. They thought that the purpose in life, and then he stopped. Okay, now he mispronounced thought, but thought is not one of the 10 words that we're focusing on. So I didn't point it out, but he did also mispronounce purpose. He said purpose. So I said purpose, and he repeated it. But again, he mispronounced it. So I said pose, and he said pose. Then I said purpose, and he got it. Then I read and repeated. They thought the purpose in life. Even though he wasn't quite perfect when he repeated it, we moved on to the next phrase. Was to feel happy. He read feel and sound like few. Was to few happy. So we followed that same pattern as we did with the previous phrase, where I said the word correctly, he tried to repeat it correctly and repeat. This time, after I said feel, he repeated it correctly right away. So he moved on to the next phrase. So after about 5 minutes, we had only finished the first paragraph, but that was fine, okay? And we stopped step 5 there. Next, I recorded the passage for him, stopping briefly after each phrase. Now, even though we had only finished the first paragraph, I recorded the second one too, in case he was interested in listening to the pronunciation of the words that I had underlined. Now, while I was recording for those, 1 minute, He made a list of those 10 words that we're focusing on. I also recorded those words. And we briefly practiced those words with me saying them and he repeating. Now, for homework, I'm going to have Luke, he's going to listen to the tape at home, and he'll be stopping at pauses, and he'll read the phrases. And then he'll also listen and repeat those list of focus words. So before the next meeting with me, he's going to record the passage again. Then we can compare his original recording with this new one. And you can see, although we spent only 12 minutes working on his pronunciation during this session, I noticed a good improvement. Probably the most benefit was awareness. 2 days later, in our regular class, I noticed he was explaining something to a classmate. At one point, the classmate looked confused and said, "I don't understand." Luke immediately repeated what he had said, but this time he made a special effort to pronounce the final consonants of all his words. And it worked. So I hope this video has been useful in showing teachers an approach that they can use to help students who have been experiencing the frustration of not being understood by others due to pronunciation problems. And that is pretty easy to implement. If you'd like to see a pair activity and worksheet that I used with a small group of students who had similar pronunciation challenges, I'll include a link in the notes below. I'll also include a link in case you'd like to read more about this one-on-one approach. Thank you for watching.